There are three sides to every story. Your side, my side, and then there's the third side, which is the truth. Many times people believe that their side is the truth. And this interview was with somebody whose opinion may not be yours, but they believe their side, the truth, is the third side of the story that you need to hear. With me right now is Virgil Goode, who is a former House of Representatives representative from Virginia, who is now running for the presidential nomination of the United States of America from the Constitution Party. Virgil, how are you doing today?
Don, doing fine. It's good to talk with you about the 2012 elections.
Fantastic. I want to start with something. Normally I start with a question, but I want to read something to you and then get your take on this. This is the presidential oath of office. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. I'd like to know from you how you feel about the Constitution and how a Virgil Goode presidential administration would differ from the last, 20 or 30 we've seen.
Well, I would I've got a copy of the Constitution in my pocket, and I would be a follower. I would be a follower of the Constitution. For example, the war in Afghanistan, I would get us out of there ASAP unless Congress makes a declaration of war. We would not go into Syria unless Congress makes a declaration of war, because that's what the Constitution provides. And I would not have gone to Libya as President Obama did just because the United Nations and some other area countries wanted him to do such unless Congress made a declaration. And I think you should follow the Constitution. Now, I admit that parts of the Constitution are open for interpretation, and some may not interpret it the same way. But as a member of the Constitution Party, I think it's important to follow the Constitution.
Well, I have heard you talk about some issues that may be up for interpretation. I'm glad you brought that up. One topic, although it's not a big topic, but it is one that's on the minds of a lot of people, is the legalization of marijuana. I heard you in an interview with John Stossel recently mention that you would not legalize marijuana. Can you speak a little bit about that? Because I know a lot of people might feel like the Constitution would allow for that.
I suspect the Constitution, the framers of the Constitution didn't think one way or the other about marijuana. Marijuana use was not widespread at all in the United States at that time. There was no rampant drug culture in the United States at that time. So I doubt seriously that was an issue at the forefront of the framers of the Constitution.
The reason why I'm talking about some of these issues and starting off with the oath of office and the Constitution and the defense of the Constitution is because it seems like the President of the United States has turned into more of a babysitter or a mother figure than a defender of the Constitution. And yet when I listen to you talk, and I've listened to a lot of your speeches and a lot of your interviews, it always does come back to the Constitution with you, hence your affiliation with the Constitution Party. Can you talk a little bit about how you got involved with the Constitution Party?
Yes. In 2008, I was invited by the Constitution Party chairman to attend the Constitution Party National Convention, nominating convention in, I believe it was Kansas City. It was at a time when Congress was busy, and I couldn't go to Kansas City. I had duties in Washington and in the district and could not attend. So they gave me another invitation in 2009. I accepted it, and we had a good exchange, good dialogue. I spoke before the National Committee, and then I attended nearly every National Committee thereafter. And I believe it was early 2010, the Constitution Party National Committee endorsed the actions of Arizona in trying to combat illegal immigration. And they were the only national committee of consequence to take that step. The Republicans were silent and the Democrats were silent. But the Constitution Party, through its national committee, stepped up to the plate and said, we support Arizona. If I'm elected president, my attorney general is going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with Arizona, asking that their laws against illegal immigration be upheld, and same with Alabama. My attorney general is not going to be down there trying to have their laws declared unconstitutional. It's under the federal domain. I'd be supporting Alabama.
And that the immigration issue is one I know that you also feel strongly about. Why do you feel so strongly about immigration? And when I've heard you talk about it, you do also link it to making a constitutional issue. Why is immigration such a key issue to you?
immigration is probably the biggest issue next to the national debt and deficit facing the country. And it's part of the national debt and deficit problem. Illegal immigration costs this country tens of billions of dollars every year. And legal immigration, when you add in everything that's involved with legal immigration, costs us too. I am the only candidate running for president that has advocated a moratorium on most green card admissions to the United States until unemployment is under 5%. Now, I'm talking about legal persons. We bring in 1.2 million every year legally into this country. 3/4 of those are working-age persons. They have a green card, and they take jobs from U.S. citizens. It's absurd when unemployment is as high as it is to bring in so many foreign workers. The big money people behind the Republicans want to bring them in to drive down wages, have a much larger labor pool. The Democrats want them in. Most of them, a lot of them are third world country persons, and they think they'll vote Democratic. They're probably right once they get to be a citizen, and the green card gives them a glide path to citizenship. Now, if I'm elected president, I'm going to do all I can to significantly reduce green card admissions in this country until unemployment is under 5%. It makes no sense in my mind to bring in foreign workers when we have U.S. citizens that need jobs in this country. And illegal immigration needs to stop. You cannot have an amnesty, and I'm willing to take the tough steps necessary to put an end to it. Unfortunately, Romney nor Obama will do that, and I don't think anyone should be in public school unless they're a U.S. citizen, naturalized citizen, or have legal papers to be in this country. If you don't, you shouldn't come to public school, because the next thing they'd say, oh, they're illegal, but they've been in the school system for 5 years or 6 years. We got to give them a DREAM Act.
Well, that's what they say now, but that's what they say now. In other words, you're really talking status quo. Right.
Yeah, I'm opposed to the DREAM Act.
Right.
DREAM Act is amnesty, and that's for the ones that are illegally in the country. But you got others, they come into the country illegally and have a child. Now, that child's a legal citizen under the current interpretation of the U.S. Constitution, and I support the end to automatic birthright citizenship. I don't think those that just come to this country, have a kid, that the child should be an automatic citizen. We're one of the few countries of the world that has automatic birthright citizenship, and I'm opposed to that.
Now, it's clear that I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, no, what I was going to say is it's clear that immigration is something that you feel strongly about. Is it a stretch to say that you see this as a national defense issue? If our borders are not secure, it is a national defense issue. And even with diversity visas, now this is legal entry. They get a green card, $50,000 a year, come into this country. There are many from Middle Eastern countries, and there could be some national defense problems with some in the diversity visa pool too. Now, how would you? I want to ask you another couple questions. I know we're tight on time,
Sure.
but I want to give you a harder question here, which is,
All right.
How would you answer people who would say, well, that sounds like about 1950s, bigoted language that we got rid of, with the Kennedy administration. I mean, gee whiz.
That's a favorite canard. When they disagree with you and you don't have any facts to counteract what you're saying, they call you a racist or a bigot. And neither is true. I was the nominator of Doug Wilder, the first popularly elected black governor in the history of the United States. And people like to make an argument like that. Not true. And so I think that scared Romney and Obama and some other candidates from addressing illegal. If I'm elected president, we're going to put a stop to illegal immigration, and we're not going to bring in foreign workers to undercut U.S. citizens until unemployment is under 5%. That have green cards.
Which gets me to the question of employment where we stand today. The president says that we are at about 7.8% unemployment. Of course, when you look at the underemployed and the folks dropping off the labor rolls and everything else, it's probably closer still to 10 to 12%. You really can't trust the numbers, but wherever we are, we're higher than I think most people would like us to be. What would you do as president to solve our economic quagmire? And you can start with unemployment. You can start anywhere you want to. We're in a mess right now. What would your administration do to turn this thing around?
Well, we need to balance the budget now, not 10 years down the road. I would also want Obamacare repealed. It is a cloud over many small businesses. They're worried about regulations and rules that they're going to have to comply with. How will the 16,000 new IRS agents interact with them as they go about the country trying to enforce Obamacare? But again, let me restate what I just said. One thing we can do is, for American citizens, have the jobs for them first. Don't bring in all these foreign workers. It's a job killer for U.S. citizens. Illegals take jobs in many instances that U.S. citizens could be doing. And they say, well, they're doing jobs that the citizens won't do. The fruit pickers and the agricultural workers that do really hard work, they are H-2A workers. They are not green carders, and they are here legally. But I think we need to make sure before any H-2A worker can come into the country that no U.S. citizen wants the job of picking apples, picking peaches, picking cabbage, or whatever the job is. And the Democrats don't like the H-2A program for the most part because the H-2A worker comes in, does a job, and then goes back to his native country. Doesn't bring the family. They don't get to go to the public school system at the taxpayer's expense. And they like the green carders because they've got a glide path to citizenship, and they're more likely to vote Democratic after they get to be a citizen. And the H-2A worker doesn't do that.
Well, you're talking about money leaving the country through the hands of both legal and illegal immigration or immigrants. But there's another way that money leaves our country, and another effect on our economy is the money we spend on wars around the world. I'd like to get your take on, maybe generally or as specific as you'd like, about what a lot of people call these wars of foreign aggression. Congress not authorizing anything. It seems like Congress is an afterthought for the last 30 years now in America deciding on these wars. But what would your administration be like with respect to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya?
All of them you just named. In Afghanistan, if Congress doesn't make a declaration of war within just a month or two after I'm president, we're coming home. We shouldn't have gone to Libya unless Congress made a declaration of war. We shouldn't be controlled by the UN and a few area foreign countries. It needs to be a declaration of war by Congress before we get involved. If they can't make the declaration, we're not getting involved.
You know, it sounds, again, you're back to the Constitution, hence your affiliation with the Constitution Party. What do you think about the idea floated that there ought to be a test of some sort before you're allowed to vote, that you ought to know something about the Constitution, you ought to know something about the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights? Would you be in favor of something like that?
If it would be broad-based and not discriminatory, I would certainly entertain that. I'd want to make sure that it didn't adversely impact just a small group of people, but having some knowledge of the Constitution that I think makes one a better citizen.
Well, I think it's interesting because your positions, they seem to rely a lot on a populace who even knows the Constitution exists. Virgil, I'm not so sure if you asked 100 people on a street corner what the Constitution is, they'd even know. I've seen a lot of reports that show people are really clueless when it comes to these issues. On that respect, education seems like another important issue in our country that we're facing, a dumbed-down population. What would you do with education? What would you do about educating people about the very documents, the framework of our country?
Well, if you want to look at the Constitution doesn't call for a Department of Education. But again, if you look at it from the perspective of the framers, that was very little public education in the United States in 1789. I believe, though, that public education is overwhelmingly under the authority and purview of local and state governments. And if I were elected president, we wouldn't have a Secretary of Education. Secretary Duncan, his position would cease to exist. We would repeal No Child Left Behind, and the federal government would step back.
Well, I suspect that's not the only secretary you would do away with. Am I wrong in assuming that there's...
No, you're right. You're right about that. We don't need as many. They only had 4 when the country was started, and you could probably get by with 4 now if you shifted functions from, say, like Interior to Defense. They have some defense, and Homeland Security has some defense aspects. So you could probably get by with 4. And I mean, I was objective at the state level in Virginia to the creation of additional secretaries. I know just for example, we had a superintendent of public instruction. So they then created a Secretary of Education, had to have a couple of assistants, staff, Used to be the governor worked directly with the superintendent of public instruction and with the superintendent of state police. Now they have a secretary of public safety. And it's the same, the national level is much more prolific in secretaries, assistants, and deputies than most states, and there certainly could be some trimming at the top that would save money and probably enhance business development across the country, because they would be less likely to enforce unnecessary and overly burdensome regulations.
Well, and Americans certainly have been saddled with that for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, maybe 200 years now. I think there's not a lot of disagreement there. There's one question I've got to ask you. I know people listening to me would be really angry if I did not ask you about the monetary system, the banking system, and the Federal Reserve. Generally, it's a large topic, but generally, what are your thoughts on the Federal Reserve and our monetary system?
Well, really, Congress has abdicated, in my view, much of its responsibility in this area to the Federal Reserve. And I have been an advocate of a full audit of the Federal Reserve. I was in Ron Paul's study group, and I believe that if we had that revelation of what a full audit would bring forth, you'd see a lot of people clamoring to end the Federal Reserve. And I have been somewhat surprised, but pleasantly so, by the advancement of that legislation. I know Congressman Paul had to be happy and pleased that the full audit bill passed the House this time. I don't anticipate it passing the Senate before this session of Congress is over, however.
Well, with only, 7, 8, 9, 20 days, 18 days, 3 weeks, we'll call it, before the election,
right.
A lot of folks are wondering who to vote for, and if you watch the debates, then you would know why a lot of people are frustrated. That it seems like the choices are exactly the same this year, maybe worse than ever. So what would you tell somebody right now, after they're done listening to you talk with me? What's the next step you want the listener to this interview to do to affect a change? And in terms of this election, how can they help you become the next president of the United States?
Go to our website, Goode, G-O-O-D-E, for president, 2012.com. You can see a number of issues addressed and discussed. And if you want to end the lack of choice between Romney and Obama, which I have called as a choice between Tweedledum and Tweedledee, you can look at our website. You'll see significant differences. And to reiterate, I am the only candidate advocating for jobs for American citizens first, by, one way, having a near complete moratorium on green card issuances until unemployment is under 5%. I'm calling for a balanced budget now. I'm not taking PAC donations. Super PACs and political action committees have far too much control over the federal election process. We need to allow only individual donations with full disclosure. And I'm also an advocate for term limits. I think term limits would help the Congress and the Senate focus more on what's best for the country and not just what's best for my next election. So I would greatly appreciate the support of the American people so we can have the right course for America after November 6, 2012.
Well, I greatly appreciate your time with me today. I know it was on short notice. Thank you so much, Virgil Goode, and good luck to you, and I hope that down the road we can do another one of these interviews.
Glad to, and thank you very much. I enjoyed the opportunity to be with you.